93, 93, 93. We back in here. The stream health is excellent now, so we back in here. I definitely didn't want to give you guys a bad experience, so I just went on ahead and restarted it. So everything should be good for now. If any changes occur, I'll let you guys know. But everything is looking good. So, we done already had a little fun with the music, so let's just get straight into what we came here to do. So we understand today is 11/11, energy of the master seer. So we're just going to do some technical analysis here and see what we come up with, take it through the degrees and see what manifests, to give everyone some insight as you take throughout your day, especially for people who have life path 11s, and if the 11 or the number 2 manifests anywhere in your numerology chart. So that wherever the 11 manifests in your chart or the number 2 manifests in your chart, then that this energy will be expanded. Peace, Natasha. Peace, peace. So looking over at the stream here, everything is looking good, so we'll get right into it. So let me write down 11/11 on the screen. Okay. Let's see. All right. So the first thing we must understand about the 11/11 is there's multiple ways to break this down. Excuse me. There's the simple way and there's the hard way. We can do the 1 + 1, 1 + 1, which of course will give us 2 here and 2 here. So in this case, we actually get a master number 22 before we then hit the 4. And we understand 2 + 2 is 4. We understand 11 is the master builder, 11 is the master seer, and 22 is the master builder or the master archetype. Not the archetype, the architect. The master architect or the master builder. And then we have the master seer. We of course know that the number 1 correlates to the sun. The number 2 correlates to the moon. And the number 4 correlates to Uranus. Also, the 11th card of the tarot is justice. Depending on which tarot deck you have, it's either going to be justice or lust or strength, depending on which deck you have. So it's interchangeable between justice and lust, because they will either be the 11th or the 9th major trump in the tarot. So the first thing we must analyze is, what does it mean to be a master? Because we have the master builder, we have the master seer, but what is it about the master? Well, in supreme alphabets, the letter M, which is the 13th letter, corresponds to master. So in order to get some type of analysis as to what master is, we must analyze the 13. So if M is master, which is the 13th letter of the alphabet, Latin alphabet, we also know that 13 is another way to get to the 4. So instead of the 1111 taking us to the 4, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, now it becomes 1 plus 3. We understand 1 is the energy of the sun, 3 is the energy of Jupiter. So essentially a master is a combination of the energies of the sun and Jupiter. We understand the sun represents personal power. And Jupiter represents divination. So a master essentially has the personal power to perform divination. Now, what would be an example of this? So for example, I can take all this off. M equals Sun, Jupiter. Okay. So an example of this, if someone is a master at something, let's just say they are a master astrologer, for example. So if we use the example of astrology, so a master of astrology would be able to not only analyze the 0 point of the sun would mean or represent the 0 point of consciousness, which would basically be your natal chart. Your natal chart would basically be your 0 point. Then Jupiter, representing expansion. Expansion of what exactly? If we analyze the attributes of Jupiter in terms of why does Jupiter represent expansion, we understand Jupiter to be the ruler of Sagittarius as well as Pisces traditionally. So we just put that in parentheses. We understand Sagittarius represents the 9th house. Then Pisces represents the 12th house. So essentially Jupiter would be the ruler of 9 and 12. Whereas the sun is the ruler of the 5th. The 9th house is a house of expansion, or we can say higher education, or philosophy. We can say the house of philosophy. Whereas the 5th house is a house of entertainment, as well as pleasure, but also creativity and self-expression. So we put creativity. So if you combine the attributes of creativity and philosophy, that produces what is called divination. Because the act of divination requires you to have some type of foundation, some type of map, some type of device, whether it's astrology or the tarot, numerology, whatever system you are using. So you are using some type of system or philosophy, and you are activating your creativity, meaning you have to come to your own conclusion. So you're not always cracking open a book. You're not going to look up a book or definitions. And that's why I try to draw everything out here, because we see we don't have to go to anyone else's perspective. We have all the tools necessary to draw our own conclusions, which is the purpose of divination. It allows you to take the format that has been laid down, or the system that has been laid down, and expand the system with your own creativity so that you can come to original conclusions. Hence, a master. So a master has the ability to perform divination because they have perfected their personal system of creativity. Their personal system of creativity allows them to access higher chambers of the mind. So their creativity, or kundalini, has essentially risen. So another way of putting it is, a master is someone who has awakened their kundalini in a particular field. So the example was astrology. They understand how to rise the serpent of astrology. You can say every science has a serpent that needs to be risen, because we understand the serpent, or the kundalini, is coiled at the spine, or wrapped around the spine 3 times. So it's wrapped around the spine 3 times. So you must uncoil the serpent 3 times before it begins to stand upwardly with spiritual currency. This is a whole, philosophy of kundalini and rising the kundalini, because you're basically taking your currency through your 7 inner planets. 7 chakras, 7 inner planets. 7 chakras, 7 planets. And what has happened, the kundalini just represents the currency. Kundalini is the currency that travels through the planets. Kundalini is the currency that travels through the planets and or chakras. That travels through we'll just put planets. So kundalini is a currency that travels through the planets or chakras, which we have 7 major chakras or 7 major planets. We also have many planets or many chakras, and that's essentially the whole science of palmistry. Palmistry essentially covers the many chakras in the hand, in the palm, and the fingers, essentially breaking down every point of the hand. That would be an example of a mini chakra. The same thing happens with reflexology, being able to push certain points on the hands or the feet to stimulate certain internal organs, right? So once again, a master. So you see, we did not have to use a dictionary. We didn't have to ask anyone else. We just simply use the tools in which we have memorized to come to original conclusions. So once again, a master is a person who has perfected their philosophy or their particular spiritual system, and then they can access their own creativity to expand that spiritual system to give them original ideas and come to original conclusions. Okay? And that's essentially why the 13 breaks down to the 4. And that's why I'm saying original ideas and original conclusions, because the 13, 1 plus 3, will give you the 4. And we understand the 4 is a planet of Uranus, which rules over Aquarius. And we know Aquarius is all about original thinking, to have original thought, as Aquarius is the rebel, the new ager, the eccentric, so on and so forth. All these terms, the activists, all these terms will apply to Aquarius, because Aquarius is all about upheaval. It's all about revolt against the system. That's why Aquarius comes right after Capricorn, because Capricorn is the 10th sign, then Aquarius is the 11th. Capricorn will represent the government or the system in place. So the next degree is a revolt against the government. or to rebel against the government, which then leads you to the 12th house of Pisces, which is now you get to explore your outer limits, because Pisces represents our outer limits. Now that you have revolted against the established system or government, now you are exploring the outer limits, essentially exploring the underground or underworld, the underground or the underworld. So just giving you a quick example of how the zodiac signs play with each other and how they actually describe alchemy. As I was speaking about yesterday, astrology goes deeper than meets the eye. It goes into alchemy. They're really talking about processes of alchemy. Each zodiac sign represents a process of alchemy. Now, going back to the original context, because again, this is the day of the master seer, we just wanted to break down what the definition of master is, and we're going to do the same thing with the word seer. So again, we understand master, or M is the 13th letter. Now, if we look at S, S is the 19th letter, but we're going to break down the entire word. So we know S is 19, E is 5, another 5, and R is the 18th letter. So we see there's two ways to break this down: long math and short math. So if we do short math, the S will be broken down to 1. So essentially 1, 5, 5, then 1 plus 8 will give you 9. So we know 5 and 5 gives you 10, and a 10 plus 1 gives you 11. Then of course a 9 replicates itself, or gives power to the 11. So essentially seer would break down to 11/2, which is the energy of the moon, or a double sun, a double or lunar sun. Let's call it lunar sun. So that is the quick way. So the word seer essentially breaks down to 11 itself. So because the word seer breaks down to 11 itself, or the number 2, the energy of the moon, this is why seer, the word seer, is all about exploring your lunar sun, or your lunar chambers, as we call the third eye. That third eye sight is what a seer possesses, because seer breaks down to 2, and 2 is the moon. The moon is having lunar sight, and what we call lunar sight, this is what we call the third eye. So a seer has a active third eye, or has penetrated into the lunar dimensions. So they can essentially block out the rays of the sun. To see into the lunar world, you have to block the solar rays. That's what 11 represents: block solar rays. That's why it's a 11, a double 1. So the solar rays are blocked. So now the lunar energy is dominant, which activates the third eye. So once again, the master is one who can perform divination, and the seer has third eye sight. So what does all that represent? So we have divination, of the third eye sight. Divination of the third eye. So when we study Egyptian hieroglyphs and Egyptian art and culture, we see the serpent coming out of the forehead of certain gods and goddesses. So the serpent coming out of the third eye, divination, serpent. Remember, we were speaking about the rising of the Kundalini. Divination allows the Kundalini to rise, where it rises towards the third eye, and we see the serpent coming out of the eye. So let me actually show you, because I'm speaking about it, but let me actually show you what I'm speaking about. So if I type in Egyptian serpent, just gonna put forehead. Egyptian serpent forehead. Images, and there we have it. So I just want to give you guys a visual, since I can actually give you a visual so you can see it for yourself. So we see the serpent exalted at the third eye. We also see it there. We see the serpent being exalted at the third eye. Another example. It goes on and on, but I just wanted to show you guys the evidence, just in case you haven't seen it before. So once again, divination of the third eye is the rising of the Kundalini towards the third eye, which activates your lunar sight once again. So you are performing divination with your lunar sight, the performance of divination via lunar sight, because we can perform divination with our solar sight. But if we are talking about the master number 11, the purposes of master number 11 is to perform divination utilizing your lunar sight, utilizing your Kundalini at the position of the third eye, because the Kundalini can occupy any of the 7 chakras. The Kundalini just essentially occupies the root chakra, and that's why most people say on survival, because the Kundalini naturally is asleep at the root chakra. So that's where most people are until you actually wake it up and rise it up. So if you do not wake it up or rise it up, it's going to stay dormant at the root chakra. So in order to activate it to the third eye, we have to perform divination, lunar divination. So this is the science of the 11, the master seer. But you see, it is from an original perspective. You're not going to find that perspective anywhere else, because we see we're coming to original conclusions. We're not relying on any other evidence. Because once again, the occult provides us with all of the tools necessary to come to original conclusions, because we are breaking down everything towards the basic mathematics. Once we are able to break down everything to the basic mathematics, we can see how everyone else came to the conclusion they came to. So instead of waiting for them to come to a conclusion, you're going through the same process they would have went through to come to a conclusion. So instead of, again, relying on someone else's perspective, we can rely on our own perspective and actually be pretty accurate. So we see everything that we're saying here. I have not looked up a single definition, but we can see the accuracy. Even without definitions, all of any word that we're breaking down, we can see the accuracy in it. So we're just focusing on the master seer so that we can understand how these energies manifest, not only in the cosmos, but also in real time, that we can actually perceive it, not just with our lunar sight, but with our solar sight. So solar sight means it can be perceived by all. Lunar sight means it is subjective. So solar, it is objective. Lunar means it is subjective. So meaning there is not an actual snake coming out of the forehead. It is subjective. The fact that it is at the forehead lets you know secretly that it is speaking about a subjective experience. You're not talking about an objective serpent or something that can be perceived by other people if their lunar sight is not activated. So whenever we are speaking about the lunar sight, it is subjective because it is based in lunar waves. Versus the objective is solar particles. So if something is solar, it can be viewed by everyone. If something is lunar, it can only be viewed by those who have stimulated their lunar waves. And most of the time, our lunar waves are stimulated when we are dreaming. And the solar particles are activated when we are awake. So essentially, we naturally perform divination when we dream. The whole premise of a dream is divination. So dreams themselves are an actual act of divination. Why? Because if you choose to awaken while dreaming, now you can go beyond, or as we call, the outer limits of Pisces. You can explore the outer limits of Pisces if you choose to awaken while keeping your consciousness in the dream world. And this is the whole purpose of spirituality. That's why Pisces is the 12th house of spirituality. Spirituality starts when you combine the lunar waves with the solar particles. The solar particles allows you to maintain consciousness while in a lunar state. And this is why Pisces has two lines with a third line crossing the two. So you have one line for the solar, one line for the lunar, then you have a line that crosses the two so that you can see that they're supposed to be merged into a single consciousness, which is an act of divination. And that's why Jupiter traditionally rules over Pisces. As we understand, Jupiter is divination. So once we're talking about Pisces, we're talking about the combination of the solar and lunar divination, versus if we're talking about Sagittarius. Sagittarius, we know the animal of the Sagittarius is a centaur. So the symbol of a Sagittarius is a centaur. So let me show you guys what I'm speaking about, just in case you guys haven't seen what a centaur. Let me make sure I'm spelling this. Yes, you are a centaur. So for all of us who have seen Sagittarius, this is a centaur. A human torso, but a animal. Basically got 4 legs instead of 2 legs. So the human part is, the upper part is human, then the lower part is, I guess this is horse. But this is essentially what a centaur, this is a mythical being. So this didn't just manifest out of nowhere. This is an actual mythical being which can be viewed via lunar sight or lunar waves. Every zodiac sign essentially can be viewed that way. But this is essentially a centaur. So this is symbolic. This is completely symbolic. So for most people, they just look at something like this and okay, this is a centaur, this is a mythical being from mythology. But we understand mythology contains secrets. There's many secrets contained within the mythology. So there's a reason why this matters. So if we go back to the symbol of Sagittarius, which is the upward pointed arrow, so we have an arrow, but that arrow has a line that crosses the bottom. That bottom represents that animal half. That arrow represents the higher consciousness. So the arrow is you striving towards higher consciousness, but you are maintaining your animalistic bottom. So what does that mean? If we truly want to understand what that means, we have to take it to the tarot. So if we look at, let's go back to the internet here. Let's type in, we just type in a Thoth Tarot art. So the card that represents the major trump that represents the Sagittarius frequency is the art card. So if you look at the art card, which is here. Okay. The art card, we see the combination or the fusion of light and dark forces. You see these two women are merged. You see they stand before a solar disk. You see behind them a solar disk, but you also see lunar crescents at the top. You see the lunar crescents, and they stand behind the sun. They are fused together. They are opposites. You see the lighter woman has a golden crown, the darker woman has a silver crown. So they are embodying the opposites of each other. Then you see the darker woman here, her arm is now lighter. Then the lighter woman, her arm is darker. Okay? She is mixing. She has a chalice in her hand. Basically, this is fire and water. She's mixing fire and water. And now she has her elementals at the bottom. Again, you know, this symbolism goes a lot deeper than where we need to go in this particular moment. But I'm just showing you guys an example of the symbolism of the Sagittarius. That's why you see the 2 points. Just like the two women, you see the merging of two polarities. And they come together at the bottom. That bottom represents the quadrant that she was cooking in. So let me go back. So she's cooking in this golden quadrant. And this is where all the energy is being focused. So all of this energy is being focused on that quadrant. And of course you see that crow and that skull. But we don't have to get into that. But all the energy is being focused on that center point. What is the mythological meaning behind the Pegasus? Well, Pegasus was manifested once Medusa's head was cut off. So in order to understand the meaning behind Pegasus, we must understand the meaning behind Medusa. And we understand Medusa was cursed to have a head full of serpents. So this also goes back to serpent magic. So it goes a lot deeper. So Pegasus, if you truly want to understand Pegasus, Pegasus was a manifestation or the purity of Medusa. Because remember, Medusa was a holy woman that was raped. Then essentially I'm giving the crazy version. This is just a crazy version. Medusa was raped by one of the mythological gods. I believe it was Poseidon. She was raped by Poseidon. Then I think Athena punished her. So she was violated, and then she got punished by basically the head mistress that was running the temple that she was a part of. The head mistress punished her, even though you can say she was innocent. She didn't call it upon herself, but she got blamed. She got cursed by Athena, and Athena made her, the savage beast that we know as Medusa, with the cursed beast with the serpent heads. So once the head of Medusa was cut off, that gave birth to Pegasus. So Pegasus essentially represented the purity of Medusa, because she always was pure, because she did not violate. I believe she was a virgin, actually. So she was basically the holy virgin, but she was violated, but she never necessarily violated within. So Pegasus was a manifestation of that inner light that remained pure, even though she had been transformed into a savage. So that's essentially, again, without going too deep into the mysteries, that's a good starting point to look. You have to see the full story of Medusa and why Pegasus manifested once the blood of Medusa was spilled. So I'm just giving you guys an example of, we see these same principles manifesting in the Sagittarius symbol, and that's why I tell you guys these so-called astrology symbols are deeper than what we utilize them for. We use them in astrological terms, but they are actually alchemical processes. And that's why when I showed you guys a card, everything that I showed you guys in that card is embodied into this one symbol. And this goes for every zodiac sign and every planetary sign. So the 10 planets in the 12 zodiac, again, the 22 points. These are more than astrology. This is also the 22 points of alchemy, or the 22 states of consciousness, or the 22 Hebrew letters, or the 22 major arcana. So that 22, or the master, that's why 22 is the master builder, because of all those correspondences. You become the master builder when you begin to synchronize all of these sciences together. The 10 plus the 12. The planets plus the zodiac. Excuse me. Once you synchronize the planets plus the zodiac, you become the master builder. Why? Because you have power over the universe. The universe is all about the 10 planets and the 12 zodiac, in the context of the tarot. So we become the master builder by synchronizing the 10 and the 12, which makes the 22 the 22 points. So these numbers were not just chosen for no reason. There's all type of symbolic meaning. I'm just showing you guys just a little bit of it. And we understand that 22 then takes you to the 4, which is the energy of Uranus. And we understand the master number 44, which is not studied in the West, is more so studied in the East. Because the West, we have the 11, the 22, and the 33. We don't really acknowledge the 44. The 44 is mostly acknowledged in the East. The 44 is known as the master healer. You become the master healer after you go through those levels of masonry. You have to go through the degree of the seer. I'm just gonna put them as degrees because these are all degrees. You can call them Masonic degrees. The seer, the builder or the architect, the teacher, and then the healer. These are 4 degrees of masonry or alchemy. 11, 22, 33, 44. What does the 4 have to do with Uranus? Because we understand Uranus represents all things unpredictable. Once we go into Uranus, we're going past the 7 inner planets. And that's why the number 4 is so mysterious. Number 4 is the most challenging number of all numbers. So the most challenging number is the number 4. Because the 4 is Uranus, but it can also be Rahu or Medusa, as we just explained. Because both of these stories represent an immortal head. The immortal head. So whether we're talking about the immortal head of Rahu or the immortal head of Medusa, we're talking about some immortal head. The common denominator between Rahu and Medusa is they were both demons. Even though Medusa didn't start off as a demon, she was transformed into a demon. Rahu started off as a demon, but he strived to become divine. Rahu wanted to strive. He was the first one to strive towards divinity, and he got so close to the point where his head became immortal, even though his body became Ketu, which is a number 7, but his head became immortal, which had not been done before. So Rahu was the one who strived beyond, you can say, his limits. Rahu decided to take on the outer limits of Pisces, to go beyond what everyone else thought was possible. Same thing with Medusa. Even though Medusa was cursed, at her death she produced Pegasus, which was the purity of herself, of her spirit, her essence. The purest point of her essence became Pegasus. So it don't matter how demonic she became, she still was able to manifest or produce purity from her own virginity. So we understand the 4 can be Rahu or Medusa. However, if we look at it from the perspective of Uranus, we have the 7 inner planets, or the 7 chakras. So the first planet that you are introduced to once you go beyond the barriers of Saturn, because Saturn represents the barriers. Once you go beyond the barrier of Saturn, you get towards, well, the first planet you come into contact with is Uranus, which is the planet of strangeness. We just put strange. Strangeness. Uranus is the planet of strangeness, strange happenings, things that actually don't make any sense, like Saturn. See, Saturn is all about the system, how things work. Saturn is all about making sense, or common sense as we like to call. Saturn is essentially common sense. But if we're talking about Uranus, Uranus represents extraordinary sense. Extraordinary sense. Extraordinary sense. That's why Uranus produces so much tension. And that's why Uranus represents sudden happenings. Because Uranus taps you into those extraordinary senses that are already within the body. They are just dormant. So once you break through the barrier of Saturn, now you are introduced to the extraordinary senses, which produces a lot of tension in the body because it begins to rise the Kundalini. That is the force of the Kundalini. The Kundalini begins to rise in the world of strangeness. Once you go into the world of strangeness, the Kundalini begins to rise, meaning the Kundalini does not respond to normal stimulation. It's the same thing with gray matter. And I did a whole video on gray matter if you want extra insight. But just to go back through it here briefly, we have gray matter and we have white matter in the brain. The brain possesses gray matter and white matter. And of course we know we have dark matter. The gray matter is at the central part of the brain, whereas the white matter is the outer parts. What is strange about gray matter is not stimulated by normal stimulation, meaning physical activity. So basically anything physical does not move the gray matter. However, the white matter is more so about defense. You know, to keep your body up and at 'em, to keep your body harmonized. That's essentially the main job of white matter. Gray matter, on the other hand, serves a completely different purpose. The only way to stimulate the gray matter in the brain is through spiritual exercises. So this is essentially why we put in any type of spiritual work. Whenever we do any type of spiritual work, we are stimulating the gray matter in the brain. And when the gray matter in the brain is stimulated, this is how we have our evolutions, our personal evolutions, as we call our awakenings, or rising of the Kundalini. The rising of the Kundalini is just awakening of the consciousness. The awakening of the consciousness happens when we are able to stimulate the gray matter in the brain through spiritual exercise. which is the whole purpose of the 1111, which is the master seer dealing with the lunar waves. That is the whole purpose of this process. The lunar waves will be spiritual exercise, which then stimulates the gray matter. And gray, once again, it stands between white and black, and which we can call white and black magic. So gray matter is that middle path between the dark and the light, right? So essentially we get the purpose, we get what we're doing here. Just wanted to give you guys some quick insights as to the 1111 and how you can take this into your personal experience and explore deeper mysteries that we did not even mention here. So with that, I bear peace. 9393. We'll be out. I'll play the outro music. And we'll check out. 1 second.
This ain't what you want, yeah, not what you expected. OG Smith and Wesson, a lot of money I'm afflicted. Disrespectful, huh? I pop a nigga like a pimple, smoke his ass like a swistle, burn his ass with all shit I've been through, bleeding crazy cause I'm mental. Bipolar, PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, then the grill in my dental. I did stay time, huh? No paid time, huh? Telling these still an issue. Not niggas about to kill you. God said my body be my temple. I'm straight up, got no riddle, huh? Hey, I'm a South rapper, but I drill too. Hey, I'm a South rapper, but I drill too. And I really won't, hey, not what you expected. OG Smith the West, a lot of money I'm affected. Disrespectful, huh? Pop a nigga like a pimple, smoke his ass like a